This is
Bam.
Aurora Winter, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Yes, yes. This is fun. We've had Aurora on the show before. She writes just tons and tons of books. I'm going to put a link up here for her latest book. It's a fiction work, but there's all kinds of stuff we can talk about with leadership. And we were talking off mic. There are so many ways we can take this: stories, words, and right now, one of the things I'm working on, and it's funny, we're both kind of in the pitching zone of the stuff that we're working on. I'm trying to get a bunch of documentaries off the ground. And
That's
my role in the documentary thing is getting excitement so I can get groundswell, so I can convince people at the next level to kick in money so we can get the big money to get these things done. Right. And I have got to tell stories about stories that haven't been told. These are real things that have happened, but they'll never get told if there isn't a Pete out there going, hey, look, you have to check out this story. It's so amazing. Right. And so I am using my storytelling abilities plus the capability of my show to connect me to this person, to connect me to that person, to connect me to that person, so that I can build this little ball of energy that allows me to maybe tell this incredible bigger story.
Well, it's all about storytelling. And like Pete's just put a link to this new book, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, which is, I see it in the link below. Grab a copy. It's available now on Amazon. It won the Reader's Choice Award, Best Teen Book 2023. And it just won the American Fiction Award as well as several other awards. So I'm super excited about that book. And while it is fiction, it's my first fantasy trilogy. The next one's coming out on Kickstarter very soon, which you can check out at magicmysteryandthemultiverse.com and find the Kickstarter link if you're a Kickstarter fan. But one of the things I thought we might want to talk about today, Pete, is it is actually the Freedom to Read Week from February 18th to the 24th is Freedom to Read Week. And so one of the reasons I am now writing fantasy is because I really want to encourage the next generation to read, to write, to think, to speak. And the book, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, also has a theme about censorship. I am against censorship. I think most people are against censorship. And that may be another thing that you want to dive into, Pete.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a good spot to talk. It is easy to say I'm against censorship until someone starts censoring things that you like to be censored, right? And so we, it's funny if you talk about a book about sexuality in any kind of way in young kids, you'll instantly say, "Hey, people on the right say I don't like that." People on the left tend to like it. If you say To Kill a Mockingbird, all of a sudden people on the left are like, "Hey, that book's a little risque for putting it in school. We don't like that," And so like you all of a sudden get this, and then people don't like the words that come out of my mouth, and I'm saying me, whoever that person is, like, we don't say that anymore. We don't say like the word master bedroom. We don't say that word anymore. Whatever, all these different things. Like, but that's you're taking words out of my mouth, or you're putting words into my mouth and saying the words I'm supposed to say, right? And these are all forms of censorship.
They are all forms of censorship. And I find that just ridiculous about master bedroom. My goodness. Anyway, what I believe, and I'm not here to tell you what to believe, because that would be obviously contradictory to my point of view, which my point of view is let's let ideas live in the marketplace. Let's debate, discuss different ideas, because people don't come up with their ideas fully formed. The only way we can really find out what we really think is by talking. Even talking to you today, Pete, or your other guests come on the podcast, they refine what they think by talking it out. And so to assume that people can come up with the final idea, all polished and nice, all by themselves in their head, is just not the way that human beings work. And I personally believe that freedom of speech is the foundational freedom upon which all other freedoms lie. And it is the foundation of democracy. And I believe in democracy. I am pro-democracy. I do not want to live in, Russia or Chairman Mao's China. I'm grateful to live in the United States and Canada part-time. And we take for granted the freedom of speech because we get offended and then we want to shut down people who say things that we don't agree with. But my point of view is that muzzling people, censoring people, canceling people is just a power grab. It's a power grab by the government. And let's just look at a little bit of history. The government used to believe that Earth was the center of the universe, and it was heresy when Copernicus said that no, we're going around the sun. The government used to only allow men to vote. It was heresy to even discuss or debate that women should get the vote, which they got so very recently. It used to be the government's point of view that slavery was good business. And it only very recently, in terms of broad stroke history, became like, no, obviously slavery is abhorrent and completely morally wrong. Even at one point, it was ridiculous, according to the main view, that people, including peasants, should be able to read the Bible. And when a gentleman translated the Bible into English so that peasants could read it, he was banned from Oxford. This is what history tells us about censorship. Yeah. And so I think a lively debate is the only way for us to get the best ideas. And the value of good ideas is thinking is what sets humans apart from animals. We use our thinking so that our thoughts die rather than us. So it's really good to debate ideas and let the bad ones wither and die and the good ones get stronger and more clear. You know, that's what I believe. And what about you, Pete?
Yeah, well, yes, I agree. And I often say wars start when the words run out. And if you limit the words that are allowed to be said or read or thought, then you're leaving less words on the table that can be shared and discussed. And, you know, right now we're having a conversation about Hamas and Israel, and we're trying to decide, you know, who's right, who's wrong in a thing that has no beginning and probably has no end. And we're trying to pick points in time to prove our point. And the reality is we could all spend more time in that literature and read and have better understanding that this is much more complex in a region that is as old as time. Like, can anybody talk eloquently about the Sumerians and the transition through all of the ages up to where we are now, or the 3,000-year history of the Arabs? Well, then please. Let's all slow down and get into the text and read and understand a little bit more about these histories and the ancient nature that we're talking about. And we can go on and on and on about that, right? But when we run out of words and when we don't practice tolerance, it's easy. It's human nature to be intolerant about things that we don't understand or we aren't familiar with. And when we practice intolerance, well, intolerance begats bigotry, and bigotry begats balled up fists and anger and violence.
I love that. That was so succinct. War starts.
Hey, thanks.
Words run out. I like it. You got a good soundbite there. Absolutely right. So I think, you know, we should encourage debate. We should encourage discussion. We should be curious about people who have different points of view from us, rather than canceling them or censoring them or, you know, throwing them in jail. You know, I think it's understood that if you want to get a stronger body, you need resistance to make your muscles stronger. And if you want to get a stronger mind, you also need resistance. And so testing our ideas, debating our ideas, discussing ideas is something we should lean into and welcome and celebrate, rather than making other people wrong who have different ideas. We should be curious and see if their ideas can help us refine our own ideas. So that's, you know, I played with this theme, you know, in the fantasy book, Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse, because I believe that, you know, if we can, it's a young adult book. So it's one of those clean young adult books. It's not steamy some like Twilight Saga. That's the book that I'm looking for. It's more like Harry Potter meets Doctor Who with a little bit of the Wizard of Oz thrown in and a little bit of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So ages 10 and up would enjoy it. But I think I wanted to have a fun, fantastic vehicle that could make it interesting for kids to talk about censorship and talk about the cancel culture, and use the fantasy to exaggerate it in kind of a fun way so that, you know, it's safe and interesting to talk about.
Yeah, the fiction thing, I want to get into that in a moment, but I do want to come back around when we're talking about the ability to have these conversations. I've been spending time, part of just my New Year sort of practice, like what can I inject into my life? Look, and I'm busy, right? I don't have a lot of time for extra things, but
Right.
I've been meeting up with the guys on my street. My street's pretty short, so it's possible to do this at a leisurely pace, but meet up with the gentleman from my street and just sit down and have a conversation over coffee, over cocktails, or just in the backyards in our neighborhood. And there's no design, there's no pace, there's just dudes talking, and
Mhm.
we end up having these conversations. And and look, I'm a conversationalist professionally, right? And so I'm not guiding, I'm kind of just letting these things happen, but I am paying attention professionally. And I noticed that we have the ability to have these, they often end up in the political sphere. And I note that even though these men all don't all agree on everything, none of them have wild, out of bounds beliefs about things.
Mhm.
They don't agree, but it's like, well, and we'll just say like 1 through 10. These are all concepts on a spectrum, and you can say any one of these is a rational belief, and
Mhm.
and you can believe that. It's almost like um, toast, and where it falls on that spectrum. Like it's all toast and it's
It's all
all okay. You may not care for toast value one, but you can say, that is toast. Or like swimming, like you're not a good swimmer, but you are getting across this body of water. And then there's, the excellent swimmer over there. And so these are all forms of swimming. And I think if we step back and we get a little less precious about our own belief and just allow someone to be where they are with where they believe, we
Mhm.
can also say, what, there's nothing wrong with believing that it is a rational, realistic thing. And maybe come back in 2 years. I know I evolve all the time on what we have these great conversations when people like us get a chance to share these ideas and concepts, and we read books, and you have your mind exploded by an expert who disagrees with another expert. My beliefs change all the time, and I'm much more willing to be wrong
Yeah.
and to learn too. That's the other thing. So if we allow people to be fallible, if we allow ourselves to be wrong, and if we allow people to move at their own pace with their beliefs, and also back up and be like, I was totally like, how many of us have had to completely redefine what we thought about COVID from
Oh my
any
gosh.
number of points of time?
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, COVID was the reason why I started writing fantasy. I thought, if not now, when? Because,
right,
life is short, and COVID made it very clear that I could die anytime. But
right,
speaking to your point, I mean, I went from one way of thinking to 180 degrees different. And in fact,
right.
COVID has um, made it more important for me to speak out about what I see as government overreach. I was living in Canada part of the time during
Yeah,
COVID, and I don't know if you followed what happened with the truckers. I mean, I
sure.
thought that was like complete government overreach. I mean, it's Canada, not the United States, but the First Amendment in the
Right.
United States makes it against the law, against the Constitution, for the government to prevent people from bringing their grievances to the government. Well, the truckers in Canada were bringing their grievances to the government in Ottawa, and our prime minister refused to meet with them, and then swiped cash from their bank accounts and from
Yeah,
the bank accounts of people who legally supported them on whatever crowdfunding thing they did. And just now the law has ruled that, I forget which court it was, but anyway, in Canada, that was
yeah,
definitely government overreach. So COVID and that whole experience of, oh, you have to get vaccinated. If you're not getting vaccinated, you're potentially, a risk to other people's health. To the
yeah,
opposite, like, oh, the government is really just trying to, or one of my thoughts, the government is trying to teach us to submit.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that it's very important that we're not all the same. I mean, in the book Magic Mystery in the Multiverse, I have kind of a little bit of fun because it's, for 10 years old and up, because it would be too horrific to make people change. So I've got all the cats looking identical. I've got all the dogs, being transformed so that they're identical, just to kind of have fun with the point. Like, it's our differences that make us so valuable. And it's not wrong if one person is distinct from another. It's delightful. It's wonderful. It's
Right.
the richness of life. And also, it makes the survival of the species much better. And one more point on COVID, although that's a
Please.
dangerous discussion to have. My older brother is a genius. He's a scientist, and he just put forth the very clear mathematical proposition that it is never wise to do something, the same thing, to 100% of the population.
Of
Like,
course. Right. Yeah.
That just
Yeah.
makes sense. Like you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's boy, oh boy. Yeah. And when you talk to actual scientists who do, even if it's not their home thing, that there are some truths within science. One is that it's never settled. It always moves. We it's someone's job in science to challenge the science. There's three kinds of papers you write. You build on the existing literature, you discover new literature, and you challenge the existing literature. Those are the three things. Those are their jobs.
Those
And
are their
so when someone
jobs.
comes in and says, I used your work and it's bullshit, you have to go, that is that person's job. And then you look at their data. You don't laugh and call them a monster and like you go, okay, well, they've done professional work. That is their job. And then you look at it and you figure it out.
Exactly.
When we had a guy who was a nuclear physicist who's worked with Nobel Prize winners, and he said, you understand that this disease is so small that it can be passed with farts, and we're not wearing masks on our butts. He's like, two, I've been paid to look at N95 masks and how do they work? How are they capable? How long are they capable? And he's like, this just in, and these are obvious things. If you have it stuffed in your purse and then you put it on your face and then you take it off of your face and you stuff it in your purse, it don't work. And it's like
Right.
all of these things, and so we have this and look, this goes back to if this person is capable of moving at 1 mile an hour and this person is capable of moving 100 miles an hour and this person just doesn't care, they all get to exist in that same reality and they don't have to all be compelled to go in a different lane, all three of them.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand that the government can't get between you and your doctor, and all of these things were forced into this one thing. Nobody knew what to do. Everybody can just have to deal with the fact that it was a very hard situation. And some states tried this, some states tried that, some countries tried this, some countries tried that, and we all did our best to get through it as best as we could. And here we are. And hopefully we don't have one of these things again. But what we do know, as your brother said, is you can't try one thing.
Yeah, exactly. But did we really do the best that we could? Because I think shutting down people with different opinions who were doctors or who were scientists was not scientific. And it was not appropriate. And it was not helpful. And it was not wise. And in fact, COVID made me realize, I'd like my life to matter. And so if I can play a tiny role in helping people think about what really matters and helping them think about censorship and free speech while they're reading a fun, entertaining book, and then maybe they get to discuss it in their classroom or discuss it with their fellow students or discuss it in a family, then that is a way that I could make a tiny bit of difference that would be meaningful to me. So that's what I'm working on.
I love it. I love it. And when we talk about the fiction space, and again, I'm going to bring this back into where your world is that you created is at. A lot of this stuff made me think about the relevance of some of the movies from maybe 30 years ago, like Johnny Mnemonic, and these places where there are the people that are like, hey, you guys can go this way towards technology and all working together and being plugged in. And then Ice-T and his crew are going to not do that. They're just going to work in the real world and they're not going to play in your world. And it does seem like we are doing things where like the government's like, now that we have access to all of your banks, we're going to steal your money from you. Or you have this, and look, I'm not against anybody, but if you have a car that's tied to the internet and you don't have full control over it because it's tied to the internet, your car can be turned off. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait a second, this isn't my car. I have to pay a subscription. And so do we want that kind of a world? Is that freedom? And it sounds like it is, but maybe it isn't.
Maybe it isn't. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's not a new saying, right? That's about
not
as
a
old as
new
things
saying.
can get.
I got it written down here somewhere. Lord Acton, 1887, was attributed with saying that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not only do they have our bank accounts, but they've got data thanks to the smartphones, like where we are at all times. So too much power.
Yeah.
And also, I think we have to be alert to spin. I mean, if you were, hypothetically speaking, an all-powerful government and you wanted to have even more power, would you call what you're up to power grab? Or would you call it something that people would go, well, I'm against hate speech. Of course, they're going to call it something that is not what it is, so that people go, well, I'm against hate speech. I am
Right.
against hate speech, but I'm more for freedom of speech. And with,
Sure.
hate speech legislation in Ireland, they're passing hate speech legislation, and Elon Musk is is willing to step up and fund Twitter users, or sorry, X users who get in trouble with that. The problem is who
Right.
defines hate, and it's not defined. It's defined so sloppily. So it's really
Right.
just a power grab. If you say something that I don't like or that erodes my power as a government, I'll take your money, I'll throw you in jail. There've
Right.
been some
Right.
ludicrous cases on that. And I don't pretend to be an expert with all of those cases, but I do have the strong opinion that freedom of speech is very, very, very important.
Yeah. Yeah. How does one develop a leadership capacity or wisdom or a callous so that they can withstand everyone's freedoms and to include freedom of speech? How does someone work on that? They hear us talking about this and they're like, yeah, I need to get better at that. How
Yeah.
do you do it?
Well, I love that you asked this question. I think there's a couple of things I'd like to share about that. One, there's a wonderful book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. You might want to have a link to that later. And
I'm going to
he
do it right now.
asks, like, how is talent grown? And he observed through research, three things are required. One, you need to want to grow your talent or grow your ability to be a better communicator. So you got to wanna, that's the beginning. And then you need deep practice, which I want to get into. And then the third thing is to have a coach or mentor to help you. But what is
Okay.
deep practice? Deep practice means to lean into a new skill right at the very edge of your capacity, about 4% more difficult than what you could normally do. So it's not twice as hard, but it's
Mm.
stretching you. And when you stretch in that way, when you challenge yourself, I mean, this is a little bit challenging having this podcast right now. I got 3 pages of notes. I'm not sure what's the next question. I want to be of service to you and I want to contribute to listeners. And I'd like to also not get canceled. So I'm trying to work on all these things at once. So maybe that's 4% of a challenge for me. What's happening in my brain right now, maybe in yours as well, Pete, as you're listening and making notes and thinking about the next question, is that we're actually growing myelin. We're
Mhm.
actually rewiring our brain. And it's that deep practice, it's that little bit of challenge, that extra 4% beyond your comfort zone that is changing the brain. It's growing myelin. So is this a big deal? What does it matter? A little bit of myelin. Oh, it is a huge deal. So myelin is like the billy goat trail or the super highway that your thoughts and that your impulses travel down. And when you
Mhm.
grow, when you deep practice, whether you're deep practicing playing the violin or playing tennis or speaking on a podcast, you can grow that myelin so that instead of your neurons passing at 2 miles an hour, they can go 200 miles an hour or even faster. So it's 100-fold upscale. So this is another reason why I'd really like people to understand that struggle is not a problem. Struggle is a gift. When you try to
Mhm.
communicate or think more clearly, that struggle helps you grow and potentially up levels your capacity 100-fold. Nothing is more valuable than being able to think, communicate, and write clearly and powerfully. That's the number one capacity of leadership. So rather than try to change everybody else so they don't say anything that offends you, instead lean into that and see how
Mhm.
you could articulate more clearly what you think. Maybe do some research. This will help you level up 100-fold. And a good example of somebody who's extremely articulate, who I'm a big fan of, is Jordan B. Peterson. And he was very articulate to start with because he was a professor, he was teaching all the time. But wow, he's a
Yeah.
loaded weapon now. He's like super articulate, but he's deep practiced. He's been on a lot of TV. He's been on speaking on stage. He's been confronted many times, and that's helped him grow. So I'd love everybody to lean into sort of a David Goggins attitude about communication, about thinking, about words, and about writing too. I want to mention a bit more about writing in a sec. But like David Goggins, he was dyslexic, but he wrote a book. But well, the ghostwriter wrote it, but it's his story, right? He's written a couple books. And one of David Goggins's main messages is do the things that you don't want to do. Lean into that discomfort. You don't want to go jogging? Well, get your running
Yeah.
shoes on and get out the door. And I think David Goggins has changed my life because he's helped me really lean into things that I don't want to do and go, this is reprogramming my body and my brain in a very useful way. Jordan Peterson, he's changed my life. People who speak up about things they're really passionate about their life experience, can make a huge difference and change other people's lives. And I want to talk about writing books and how struggling with your ideas can refine them. But I want to give you a chance to comment about David Goggins or whatever you want to there, Pete.
Yeah, I want to talk.
Yeah, I know.
Let me talk. It's my show, damn
it's
it.
your show.
The one thing I want to say about all that is there's a concept that I use is miscomfort. And it's just simply once you get out there into that, what you think is discomfort and you get to doing it, you're like, oh, wait, actually, this is comfortable. I just didn't know this comfort. And so it's like a friend of mine I had lunch with, and I love going and seeing the people that I know and spending time with them, breaking bread and talking. And this person didn't realize they love bicycling. And for them, they entered it from a mindset of discomfort. And now they talk about 2-hour bike ride as being a short bike ride.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. And so it's miscomfort, right? And so you're like, oh, you get in there and you try this thing and you realize actually this is a love affair and this is comfortable and I love it. Yeah. And so I'm offering that to you as a way to rephrase some of these things, because discomfort, sure, sit-ups are not comfortable when you're in the middle of them, but some things are actually culture. Like when you go into a different culture, it's not supposed to be a comfortable thing, but you develop the comfort because you realize this is a beautiful culture and I'm in Alaska and it's totally different. Or when you recognize that deserts are beautiful, when you first enter a desert, like it's stark and nothing looks alive, but once you learn how to see it, there's beauty all around you in a desert. So that's the one thing I would offer with that.
I love that. I would even like to say myth comfort, MYTH, because it's like kind of a myth, that we buy into the idea that it's uncomfortable. My mom, she's passed on now, but one of her favorite sayings is beware the comfort zone. There's no growth there. And, but I love what you're offering there, the miscomfort. Yeah.
I've got a new one I came up with the other day. You ready for the new one?
Okay.
Divisive. So it's not just divisive, but divisive. And I haven't figured out how to spell it, but obviously we have to get off these because they're divisive, and
they are
TV and these things that are designed to create. And we know this thing is bad for us in terms of dopamine hits and contagious, scrolling and all that. But so is the TV. And when you watch less news, and you enrich your life by meeting with your friends who you don't get to see often enough. And you say things like, we really ought to get together more often. You should hear yourself say that and go get together with them more often and screw that stupid box that's divisive and go enjoy your life more.
Good sound bites, Pete. I love that. That's really good. Especially because it's an echo chamber and it feeds us more of what we already think or feeds us more of what pisses us off. And, that's how the algorithms work. So they make us angry, or they make us just believe what we already believe. Reinforce
or give you problems that you have no business caring about. Like, look, I can't change the environment. I'm not the problem with the environment. Pete is so insignificant, and you can say every person can contribute. I have nothing to do with war. I can't burn as much oil as a super tanker. I don't consume that much stuff. Let's be honest. I am not the problem here. Look, I'm a person on the planet, so I contribute a little bit, but that's just not my job. I have another job, right? And I try to do what I can to make my part of the world a better place. Maybe I can be better at that. I have a bigger impact doing that than I don't know, hand blending and chewing up my coffee beans instead of using electricity.
Well, this show has an impact. And what about, what is the documentary that you're working on? Probably that will have an impact. What's that show about?
That's right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Like
you've
in all
got,
these.
not many people can make documentaries or be a podcast host. That's your
Yeah.
superpower.
Yeah. And maybe I can't make a documentary. Let's be honest. We think we can. I still got to do it.
Do you want to share what it's about, or is it top secret?
Oh yeah, sure. There's a couple of things. There's some stuff I can't talk about because it's a little further down the chain, and so it exists a little more than the other ones do. But there's two. One's about my hometown. There was this basically the first big prize fight ever, and it kind of makes boxing history, and it establishes everything. And it's this marvelous fight, and it's just rich with all of these things, and it's from a time in history that we don't really talk about, the 1890s. And it just happens like a mile, just right. I'm pointing at it right now. And it is just this beautiful story of these two guys that grew up in San Francisco, and they fought any number of times. They came up as young kind of street guys fighting and everything. And it's just this crazy, crazy story. And it's got so much stuff in it. So it's just exciting. And the other one is about a very good but not quite Hall of Fame baseball player, but he has this baseball life that's very Jackie Robinson-esque. His name is Felipe Alou. So we'll see if I'm able to get enough interest and gather enough money to be able to tell these stories. But they're both very, very good stories, and they're both sports in this case. Not all of these documentaries I'm working on are sports related, but these two happen to be. But neither of them are. They're still about life. And so they're not like, these are sports documentaries. Yes, they're sports themed, but they can fit anybody because they're bigger. They're life stories.
Well, stories are so powerful to change lives. So I would offer to you that don't worry about grinding your coffee by hand and doubling down on, the podcast and your documentaries. Like, as you say, like, stories are how people learn values.
Right.
Stories are how we decide how to live our life. Like, one thing that really stood out to me, I grew up in an academic family, and so we're very scientific thinking, but you cannot actually decide what to do next with math or science unless you filter it through what is your goal. And to filter it through a goal, you have to decide what matters to you. And so for both of us, I think we are filtering it through, well, who am I? What am I really good at? And what could I do that would be creative and would be a contribution and would, add some value to the world?
Right.
So stopping the war in Ukraine is not something either of us is capable of doing or available to do or able to do. But your documentaries and my books and the other things that we both do, those are things that we can make a difference. So I'm quite stoic in my philosophy. I totally agree with what you're saying, Pete. I think so many people waste their time complaining about stuff that they don't really know about and they're not going to do anything about. So why don't you, instead of doing that, focus on your own life and your own ability to make a difference in whatever way, in your family, at your work, through your podcast, through your documentaries, in my case, through my books. I think if we all paid more attention to our own little backyard, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah. Well, and build consensus, right? If you want to get something done, what size consensus could you build to make a change? And if it's 12 people, that's significant to make a change. Go make that change.
Go make that change.
And even if you get it wrong, we made a mistake. Well, let's go try again. Well, now you're making changes.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about your fiction book. I keep putting it off. Let's talk about this thing.
All right. I love this book, Magic Mystery in the Multiverse. It's the first in a trilogy. The next book is going to come out on Kickstarter. So if people would like to follow it on Kickstarter, they can go to magicmysteryinthemultiverse.com and then they can find out about the Kickstarter, which will probably be, there you got the link there, which will probably come out in a couple of months. And then there's a third book. I've written books 2 and 3, so don't be worried that if you start book 1, you won't get the rest of the trilogy. But this book has won the Reader's Choice Award, Best Book for Teens, the American Fiction Award, Best Preteen Book, and about a half a dozen other awards. I guess I already said that. But my life was changed when I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was only 9 years old. I love the Narnia series. And I remember reaching up on my tippy toes to get the last book in that series, which is called The Last Battle. And as my little 9-year-old fingers touched that book, I just felt a chill of energy because I realized that I felt so excited. I felt anticipation about reading that book, but I also felt grief because it was the last book in the series.
Mm.
And in that moment, I realized that C.S. Lewis, the author, was a kind of wizard because he was able to transport me to another place and time that didn't even exist, but it was real in my heart and mind with just little black dots of ink on white paper. And in that moment, I realized that there was nothing more magical than being a writer. And I determined to do everything I could to become a great writer, or at least a decent writer, following in the footsteps of C.S. Lewis. So many years passed. I took an MBA. I had a bunch of businesses. I made a bunch of movies, and I was on a much more practical path of writing nonfiction books and helping people through my company, Same Page Publishing, to write their books. But when COVID hit, I'm like, if not now, when? Aurora, you've since 9 wanted to write a fantasy series that would appeal to young adults like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. When are you going to do that? Or are you just BSing? And I decided, okay, I'm going to do it now. And it's my art project, and I release any attachment to it making money or making a difference, but I'm going to do my best to make a difference. And so the story is about a 13-year-old aspiring actress from Los Angeles, where I'm based right now. Her name is Anna, and she and her younger brother, Zachary, go for this joyride in their super genius uncle's experimental car, which he tells them, you can play with anything, just stay away from the car. Of course, that makes it absolutely magnetic. So they get in the car, which is the parallel universe pod, and it transports them in the multiverse to a completely other planet. Then it crash lands on a censor. And that's the kind of censor who is sort of an evil witch. And like The Wizard of Oz, the book is humorous and satirical. They land on the Emerald Censor and kill her, or at least she vanishes. So that means that Anna and her brother create instant friends. They make friends with a whole bunch of weird and wonderful, wacky creatures, including a talking dog. But they also make really instant enemies with the super powerful tyrant lord of this area, who has these censors running around censoring people with word crimes and the coercer guards. So she's basically on a race for her life right from the very get-go. But she also has friends, and everything goes terribly wrong when her brother gets kidnapped by one of these evil beings and is frozen solid on another planet. So now it's up to Anna. Will she be able to claim her magical birthright? Is she the one that is rumored in the prophecy to come and save this low-tech planet where they've got horses and carriages? Will she be able to get back to the high-tech planet of Avenir, which has ruined its atmosphere with a nuclear war, and they can't breathe? So they are just living in this little tiny bubble, and they're stealing the oxygen from the low-tech planet where she and her brother first landed. So will she be able to survive? Will she be able to get back to Earth? Will she be able to rescue her brother? And will she be able to overturn this nasty ruler, the Lord Orator? So that's the premise. I have a lot of fun with it. Reader's Choice Award said it was like a fun, fantastic, fast-paced adventure, but I've hidden in there a few messages that matter to me that we were talking about earlier in this podcast. So most people can't put it down. They find it a real page turner, and I'd love you to use that link and follow it on Kickstarter for no cost, no obligation. You can see what I'm doing on Kickstarter and decide if you want to get book 2. And Kickstarter is kind of fun. I don't know if you've ever backed anything on Kickstarter, Pete, but it allows a way for authors to make a more direct relationship with their readers and offer other things that you can't really offer if your book's just for sale in a bookstore or on Amazon. So I've had the artist who did this book cover, which is an award-winning book cover. I've had him create a bunch of digital art for every character, so that people will be able to see a bunch of images and they get color images of all the fun characters. So a bunch of things like that can happen on Kickstarter. Have you ever backed anything on Kickstarter, Pete?
I have backed a couple things on Kickstarter along the way, and the various Kickstarter type things. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. If I've got a couple of dollars and a friend is doing something, for sure, I've done
yeah,
that. It's a great way to get on board and get something going. I with my little documentary projects, I'll be going around to friends and family and doing like an investment round, right? And
nice.
doing sort of my own little private Kickstarter type thing. It's more of an investment in this case where I'm like, hey, you give me X, you get Y back if I can sell the damn thing. But yeah, these little vehicles, they're wonderful ways to get something off of the ground and take some of
Yeah,
the burden off the creator. Because as you know, inventing a universe, writing it. I mean, everybody's like, Pete, why don't you write a book? And I'm like, you have to realize what it takes to write a book, and then to get your money back. It's like it's just it is very hard to make a book exist and be worth your time, and so this Kickstarter campaign is a great way to like take some of that weight off of you as the author. So you're like, this is why I'm justifying my time. We're trying to create this thing and give it some legs. And so I think it's a great way to support. Count me in, and I will definitely kick in some on the Kickstarter as soon as we're done doing the show.
all right, that sounds fantastic. Well, I love Kickstarter because it's not either Kickstarter or publish another way. It can be both
Yeah,
and.
right.
So, and I love the chance to get a deeper relationship with the audience and the readers, and you can follow for free. But then there's also a chance to get better or different quality of books and bookmarks and illustrations and fun stuff. So magicmysteryinthemultiverse.com, people can find out about the Kickstarter there, or they can jump on over and grab the book. Yeah, there, he's
Yeah.
got the link there. You were talking about writing books. So I wanted to circle back around to something because I think most people think, well, I don't know what I would write a book about. And that's
Right.
why at Same Page Publishing, what I do is I interview people, because once again, it's this theme of we don't know what we want to say until we talk it out. And curiously, there's something magical about having somebody listen attentively. So if I just talk into a recorder, it's not the same as if I'm talking to you, Pete. Like, you're bringing so much richness to this conversation. It's a completely different conversation than if I just recorded myself. So as I help people at Same Page Publishing create books, I interview them in a podcast like episode like this for each chapter.
Right.
And what happens is that people then they get a bunch of audio and video that they can use in social media, and then they're already media trained by the time that their book comes out. So as you're pointing out, it's hard to make money from a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But my book, Turn Words into Wealth: Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book, shows 7 different ways that you can monetize your message. The book Thought Leader Launch also gives you a recipe for monetizing your message. But what I've found with the clients that I've helped is if you have a business and your book is simply a lead magnet, it's like content
Right.
marketing, like your podcast is
Yeah.
content marketing. With a book as content marketing, it's really not that hard if you have already got a business going to get a great return on your investment. For example, I had some clients, I helped them write a book about dentistry, and their business went from 1.5 to over $6 million. So
Dang.
it was the book, but it was also them getting much more clear on their brand. It was them being received as thought leaders in their community, being top 40 under 40, and being like mini celebrities in their community. And then they opened other locations. So there were quite a few factors, but them getting clear on their message and having their book,
Yeah.
Keys to a Healthy Smile After 40, was certainly a key element of that. So monetizing fiction books is much more difficult, although I have helped a lawyer write this book, Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer by Michael Stockham. And he loved the process so much that now we're working on 9 more legal thrillers. So that's really fun. And he was an award-winning finalist for the American Fiction Awards. And it brought him a great deal of satisfaction. About 50,000, he's got about 50,000 copies have been sold. So he's got a fan base. And before, he was a litigation attorney. So it's an investment in pivoting his career. We're going to Media Festival to pitch the new books as a TV series. So we'll see. But certainly,
Yeah.
if you have a business, having a book is kind of a no-brainer. If you have the kind of business that you're a leader in, or have intellectual property, or solve a problem, because Amazon is the #3 search engine. So if you can solve that problem for people with your book on Amazon, they can find you around the world, and then some percentage of those people will want to work with you directly. That's how my business works.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I get down on books quite a bit because it is very hard. But you're right. If you work within the system, and just like LinkedIn, if LinkedIn works for you, it's like, hey, don't forget LinkedIn works, and Amazon does work, and these things do work. So absolutely. And there are wonderful people like you, like other people. Heck, I'm producing a book right now, right? And you sit down and you do have these long conversations, and then bam, you get that turned into written words, and then
Yeah,
you are a significant portion of the way into the process of writing a book. You are nowhere
yeah,
near done, but a lot of that stuff that you worry about is behind you in the review mirror, and you're looking at a different set of problems that are deeper into the funnel of, hey, how do I write a book?
exactly. Well, most people don't realize it, but even Sir Winston Churchill, he didn't write books by typing them. He dictated them. He had, executive secretary and assistants helping him. He wouldn't have produced so many books and been an award-winning
Yeah,
writer if he hadn't been verbally dictating them. And the
yeah.
same with, politicians and other people. They're not at the keyboard. They are sharing their stories with a writer or wordsmith or ghostwriter or executive
Mm,
assistant who then turns it into something for them. And that is something that I offer at Same Page Publishing. So, for example, Dr. Jennifer Herrera, she wanted to write a book for 5 years. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to agonize over it so much. She came and met with me for a weekend. And after she shared her stories for the weekend, her part of it was done. And then my team and I took that material, took her stories, her passion, and helped her create, her own book. And even
yeah.
people who've got dyslexia, for example, my client Xander Sprague, his book is Epic Begins with One Step Forward. He has dyslexia. Words are difficult for him. Oh, he's a great speaker. Don't get me wrong. He's a great speaker, but
Right.
he doesn't like, typing words. And so I interviewed him and we collaborated together and created his book. My name's not on it. Epic Begins with One Step Forward, and that's a fun way to go. So don't get locked into doing it a way that you find hard, unless it's like, what did we say? Miscomfort.
Yeah, miscomfort. Yeah, I need to do this. Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to get these things done. And you know what? Ghostwriters, not a bad way to go either. And
Not a
boy, oh
bad way
boy,
to
they
go.
are great. Yeah, they're there and they are great at what they do. And that counts for a lot. What else do you want to get into? We got a little bit of time left. I don't want to waste it. So what's interesting to you
What,
right now?
what else do I want to get in? I want to have a tip. Oh, two things.
Yes.
Um, I really want to share with people the magic of pivoting. So I
Okay.
think it's ancient way of thinking to think that you go to university, you take a course, get your degree, and then you do that for the rest of your life. I have pivoted every decade or sometimes every couple of years. So in my 20s, I started my first business. In my 20s, I sold that business. I started a second business. In my 30s, I started a third business. I started writing nonfiction books. In my 40s, I started yet another business. I raised 5 million. I went on to make 8 films with a film production company. Then I started yet another business and trained coaches. Then I turned 50 and I decided to get my MBA. And, then COVID hit and I decided I was going to write fantasy. So I'm in that miscomfort zone
Yep.
a
I love
lot.
it.
And I love it. I'm thriving
Yeah.
there. It's just like your friend that you mentioned who wasn't sure about bike riding, and now a 2-hour bike ride is a short bike ride. So
Yeah.
if we are just having Groundhog Day and doing the same thing every day, it's like our life force is being sapped by that.
Yeah.
So I really want to
Yeah.
encourage people to, if you wanted to write a book and you're putting it off, stop putting it off. Start today, and
Yeah.
or whatever you're putting off through fear or wanting to stay in the comfort zone, don't.
Yep.
Life is short,
Yeah.
so make
Yeah.
make the most of it. And I want to give people a couple other tips, but do you want to add in something there?
No, but that's exactly right. And sometimes, look, we're approximately the same age. I'll just say I'm 54, and I look ahead, and there are not that many years left where I can reliably be healthy and mobile and
Yeah,
contributing, and I need to like really think about what is left for me. Look, I'm not going to die tomorrow, but you never know, right? And
yeah,
so what am I going to do? And I do need to be more selective. And I don't want to sit on the couch and do as many things, but I have an elegance and efficiency that I work with now. And so I know that it's easier to sit on the couch, watch TV, or stay in, but I know better. And so I do get up and I go out, and I've got my calendar full today. I've got things to do all day long, but none of it is exhausting. I'll be exhausted at the end of the day, but it's all enriching stuff.
It's a good
And I'm
example.
constantly putting good work into good things. And so, yeah, go out and hear the symphony, go out and see that friend that you've been meaning to see. And again,
Yeah.
put this divisive device down
Put
and
the
go and
divisive
go and
step away from the
why?
divisive device. I agree.
Yes, yes.
So the other
That,
thing,
that's what I wanted to add to that. Please.
yeah, no, that's really, really important. I wanted to add, what is the value of a story? I mean, I've said, and you've said
Mm,
that, storytelling is very important, but exactly how important is that? So I was researching that. That's my MBA showing. And there's a book called Significant Objects where they did an experiment and they put 100 different distinct objects on eBay with or without a story. And the stories were written by 100 different people. Some were professional writers, some were amateurs, and not all of the stories were praising the item. Some of them were kind of ghoulish. But what they discovered was by adding a story, they added significance. And by adding significance or meaning to the object, what do you think happened to the value that it sold for?
it
Do you want
went
to
up. It
sort of
went up.
guess?
Yeah.
Ah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
It went up a shocking amount. It went up 27-fold. So
Yeah.
if you're not adding a story to whatever you're up to, you're really leaving a lot of money on the table and leaving a lot of potential connection in the mind of your listener
Right.
not activated. So you're telling
Yeah.
stories on this podcast and through documentaries. So you're adding so much value by doing that, Pete.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I, attempt to do the same. So again, it circles back around to the most valuable skill anyone has as a creative person or as a leader or an entrepreneur or manager or even somebody leading their own family is to
Yeah.
communicate powerfully and effectively and to
Yeah.
understand. Don't know if we have time to get into the neuroscience of communication, but that's detailed in the book Turn Words into Wealth. To really understand how people listen. And it's usually not that message sent is message received. And to learn a few communication hacks, I can give maybe a quick couple here. So one is a myth bust. A myth bust. So learn the structure of communication so you've got it handy. So a myth bust would be what Pete did earlier when I talked about the comfort zone and he changed it to the miscomfort zone, right? I love that. So it was taking something ordinary and straightforward that people get and then twisting it on its head. And that really became
Yeah.
memorable, right? And so that was a kind of a myth bust that he did. So I thought that was super valuable. So that's one of the communication hacks that I like to teach people and that's shared in the book. Turn Words into Wealth. Also, you and I both know about the hero's journey, like Joseph
Yep.
Campbell, or movie structure. Can you tell your story of what you're up to using that structure? And so, every leader, I think, can benefit from learning a little bit about story structure so that they can, enhance their message. And one more quick thing, and then I really have to hear from Pete, is like AI is so scary, right? ChatGPT can
Mm,
write something, it may be crap, but it's very, very fast. So my
yeah.
my invitation is to double down on being human. So what does that mean? It means just information is not going to cut it anymore because Google or ChatGPT or Claude or all these other AI things can give you more information than can, choke a horse, but nobody's got your stories. Nobody's got
Yeah.
your life experiences. So use your own stories to illustrate whatever points you care about. I did that just a second ago. I'm like, okay, the magic of pivoting. In my 20s, I did this. In my 30s, I did this. In my 40s, I did this. Right. So adding my own stories makes that a message that the AI could never deliver. I want to hear what your thoughts are about AI.
Yeah, well, first off, so AI is great, and if it's in the right sense, it is powerful because it can do very basic things fast, right? And it
Yeah.
can give you a boilerplate, like I need a 60-second script for an ad for a book about, whatever, and it'll get you started, and you're like, oh, good, I didn't have to do all that like basic thinking, okay, and
Yeah.
then you can shape it and everything else. So in that sense, it's great, and it's world changing, but a friend of a friend said, "Hey, we've got this combat focused Chat GPT based. All I've read all the war books AI strategic machine. Test it." And I'm like, "I'll break this thing in 2 seconds," and I did. I
Yeah.
flipped it on its head because it's not smart enough. And
Right.
so, I said, "Where are your proofs? Show me good examples." And it's like, and it was dumb all of a sudden,
Right.
and I'm like, so this thing can't, it gives you strategic ideas that are banal, right? And so it can't
Right.
get past banal and platitudinal thinking. And so we have to continue to realize that we have to be the ones that say, okay, there's context that it can't provide. And by the
Right.
way, when you ask AI who I am, who's Pete A. Turner, it has made up a resume that is now real. It's convinced itself that I went to University of Michigan and got a PhD, that I was a Green Beret. None of these things are true. And so the things that have never been published about me, it can't possibly know. And so our own stories can become more rich. So that's the first thing I would say about all of that, is that as much as AI is incredible, it only knows what it can know, and it can't know. Like I love this. I learned this from Bono, so this is not me. But when you take words, and Winston Churchill too, when you take your own words and you hear them back, and someone reads them back to you, and you're like, oh wait, I can improve that, and then you twist it or you turn that phrase into something better. Um, Boy, you can do something. So like you think about a twist of fate, that's pretty scary. How about a fated twist?
Mm,
And you're like,
mm.
oh man, and I think about a great example of a fated twist is the end of Apocalypto. You have this whole journey you go on, and then here come the conquistadors,
Yeah.
you know, and you're like, oh damn, that's darker. We went on this journey, we were invested in it, and then this fated twist is coming, and we like, oh, and so all of these things that AI not yet can't handle. So that's the one thing I would say, on the AI front, is that we have the ability to control that. The other thing that AI can't do, and one of the things I do when I'm actually talking about my documentaries, because my job is to create the excitement and to
Yeah.
I always talk about affect over effect. And
Mm,
so, and people don't like affect in this sense, but it works. If I can create an emotional response to stimuli, I'm doing my job, I'm selling my story. And so
yeah.
I do things like, with this boxing story, it's one of the first times where there was gloves on the hands of the fighters. One of the fighters thought he'd be crafty and not bring gloves, so it would be bare knuckles because that would suit his advantage. And so he has to put on these, and I put on the gloves in this. When I talk about it, like he puts on rider's gloves from like a horse and buggy rider, and so I put the gloves on so you can picture it in your mind. And then I talk about a sheriff who's like going to break up the fight, and he rides, and I ride the horse. And so you
Yeah.
can see the horse, and then he goes, "Oh damn it, I'm going the wrong direction." I turn the horse around in the story, and then I ride towards this barn, and so I get them in their movie camera in their mind, and they're seeing the story
Yeah.
as this fight so I'm using the pantomime of the story so that they see it, and then they're like, oh, and I can see. And once I get them to start directing the movie, I shut up and I stop acting, because they're now watching the movie in their mind when I'm describing, like they're on a barge, they're in the bay, they're in this little cutout. And now people start coming up in these different boats and different steamships. And they've come from San Francisco, and and they're like, oh, and then they're rowing. I'm like, yes, they're rowing up. Yes, yes. And so now you see what I've done. They're emotionally invested. They're physically acting it out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this person's interested. I don't have to sell this anymore. Now you can see why I'm so excited about this story, right? And so AI can't do that. That's my job, to get
Yeah.
interest in this story. And even if I don't sell this person on, like, hey, I need money to get this going forward, I have them interested, and they'll tell someone, oh, Pete's working on this project. You should, you can't wait, because everybody knows about this fight where I'm from. That's my job.
That's your job. And you obviously understand the neuroscience of communication, because you're not just delivering intellectually,
Yeah,
you're broadcasting your emotions, your
that's right.
enthusiasm, your pantomime, and
Yeah,
you're getting them involved
yeah.
in it. So that is
Yep.
brilliant. You actually are.
And because I'm a communication major with my VA, I'm like, I sent the message out, I'm getting it back, I'm shutting up. Now they're communicating back to me.
Now they're broadcasting to you. You've got them in
Yes.
the palm of your hand. So it sounds like that documentary is going to happen, Pete. I look forward to
I
watching.
hope so. I'm pretty confident that it will. Yeah. Well, look, I've had you for an hour, and I don't want you for a minute more than that, unless you have something else big you want to say. Is there anything else you want to close with?
No, but it's been so fun. I'd love people to follow Magic Mystery and Multiverse, follow me on Kickstarter, maybe grab a copy of this book. This is a book that you would love to share with your family. I think, maybe 9 years old or more could read it. It's designed for young adults and middle grade. It's clean, so there's nothing to be ashamed of handing it if you're aunt or uncle or parent or grandparent. Magic Mystery and the Multiverse. It's the first book in a trilogy. And if you're a teacher or if you'd like to explore free speech, it also talks about censorship in there. So it gives an opening for you to discuss that if that's something that you'd like to talk about. I know Pete had a lot of great comments about free speech. So it was really fun connecting with you, Pete.
Yeah, like always. And like I always say is buy two. Buddy, read it. If you're an aunt, read it with your niece or nephew, and that would be fun. And otherwise, everybody watch these credits, and I'll talk to you guys. I think tomorrow we got an episode coming up. Aurora, as always, thank you very much. Stand by. I'll be right back to you. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.